Here we need to write in scientific notation, and notice everything already has a times 10 raised to something, but the issue is that the numbers at the beginning do not fall between 1 and 10. So for the first one, we have 23 times 10 to the 2. So we have our decimal point there. We need to move it to the left 1 to get it in between 1 and 10. So now we have 2.3 times 10 to the 2, that's the original 2. Anytime you move your decimal point to the left, you're adding, and in this case, we added 1, because we moved the decimal point to the left 1. So we get 2.3 times 10 to the 3. Okay, so let's go to the 0.003 times 10 to the 5. Same thing, this is not between 1 and 10, so we need to make it between 1 and 10. We move the decimal point over 1, 2, 3, so 3 times. So now we have 3.0 times 10 to the 5, but we moved it to the right, so that's subtraction, and we moved it to the right 3 times. So we have minus 3. So our final answer is 3.0 times 10 to the 2. All right, the next one is 34.1 times 10 to the 3. Again, 34.1 does not fall between 1 and 10, so we need to move the decimal point over between the 3 and the 4. So I've moved it to the left 1, so I have 3.41 times 10 to the 3. That's the original. And then I moved it to the left, so that's a plus. And I moved it 1 space, so it's plus 1. So my final answer is 3.41 times 10 to the 4. Okay, now I have 0.09 times 10 to the 4. Again, it does not fall between 1 and 10, so I need to move the decimal point to the right twice. So now I have 9. You can do 9, or more often you'll see 9.0 times 10 to the 4, that's the original, and then I moved it to the right twice, so to the right is minus, and it's minus 2 because I moved it 2 spots. Now I do the subtraction, and I get 9.0 times 10 to the 2. Okay, the next one, 0.12 times 10 to the negative 2. Again, 0.12 does not fall between 1 and 10, so the decimal point moves to the right 1, and I get 1.2 times 10 to the negative 2. But I moved the decimal point to the right, which is subtraction, and I moved it 1 place to the right. So my final answer is 1.2 times 10 to the negative 3, because negative 2 minus 1 is negative 3. All right, and the last one, again, 43 does not fall between 1 and 10, so this value right here. I need to take my decimal point and move it to the left 1. I get 4.3 times 10 to the negative 4. I moved it to the left, which is plus, and I moved it 1 space, so I add 1. So my final answer is 4.3 times 10 to the negative 3. And that is my final answer. Here we need to do operations with scientific notation. And in each case, I want to work with the numbers first and then the exponents. So for the first one, I have 3 times 2, which is 6, or 6.0. times 10, and then I work with the exponents, and I'm using a product, so this is the product property of exponents, which has you add the exponents. So I have 7 plus negative 2, or 7 minus 2. That's another way of writing that. So my final answer is 6.0 times 10 to the 5. Now I want to make sure it's my final answer by looking to see if this value is between 1 and 10, which it is. So the 6 times 10 to the 5, or 6.0 times 10 to the 5, is my final answer. All right, I'm going to do the next one, which is another product, another multiplication. So I multiply my first two values, 4 times 3, which is 12, times 10, and then I apply the product property of exponents, which is adding them. So I get negative 3 plus 5. So now I get 12 times 10 to the 2. And then notice 12 does not fall between 1 and 10. So I need to do what I did in the previous problems and make it between 1 and 10. So I take my decimal point and move it to the left 1. So I know that I'm going to be adding 1 because it's to the left, or adding, and then I add 1 because I move to the left only one space. So it's 2 plus 1. So my final answer is 1.2 times 10 to the 3. All right, now we have the quotient property or division to use. So like with the products or multiplication, I'm going to work with the numbers first, my 4 and my 2. Well, 4 divided by 2 is 2, and I get times 10. And then the quotient property says I subtract my exponents, so I get 5 minus 3. So for my final answer, I get 2 times 10 to the 2. And again, I want to confirm that it is actually my final answer by making sure that this value, in this case the 2, falls between 1 and 10, which it does. So that is my final answer. Okay, so for the last one, again, it's a quotient property. I divide my first numbers, so 144 divided by 12 is 12, times 10. Now it's the quotient property, so I have to subtract. So I have 4 minus, that's the subtraction of the quotient property, and then I'm subtracting a negative 2. So be very careful of that, because that turns positive. So that becomes 12 times 10 to the 6. 12 does not fall between 1 and 10, so I need to move the decimal point over to the left 1. So I get 1.2 times 10 to the 6, and then plus, because the decimal point moved over to the left, and it moved over once, so plus 1. My final answer then is 1.2 times 10 to the 7. I have more operations with scientific notation, but this time I have a combination of operations. So for the first one, I have 3 times 10 to the negative 3 times 6 times 10 to the 4. Okay, that's this part. Over 3 times 10 to the negative 3 times 2 times 10 to the 5. All right, so that was the denominator. So I want to combine the numerator first, then I combine the denominator, and last I do the division. So to combine, I use the product property. So it's 3 times 6 is 18, times 10, and then again I have times 10 to the 3 and 10 to the 4. So I add my exponents because it's the product property. So my final answer for this part, for the numerator, is 18 times 10 to the 7. Now I have to do that for the denominator as well. So I multiply the first numbers, 3 times 2, which is 6, times 10. Now I have to add my exponents using the product property. So 10 to the negative 3 plus 5, which then becomes 6 times 10. Negative 3 plus 5 is 2. So notice I've done the product property for both the numerator and the denominator. Now that all of those are combined, I can use the quotient property. So I divide my numbers, 18 divided by 6, which is 3, times 10 to the 7, and then I subtract my other exponents. So 7 minus 2, because again, that's the quotient property of exponents. So I have 3 times 10 to the 5, and then you want to double check, does 3 fall between 1 and 10? It does, so this is my final answer. All right, we're going to do the same thing on this next one. So do the numerator first. We have 5 times 4, which is 20, times 10 to the, and I need to use the product property, so I add my exponents. So 5 minus 3 or plus a minus 3, either is fine, divided by, now I do my denominator. So 2 times 10 is 20, times 10 to the negative 5 plus 10. Negative 5 plus 10. All right, so now I need to rewrite both with combined exponents. So I have 20 times 10 to the 5 plus negative 3, which is 10 squared, and 20 times 10 to the negative 5 plus 10, which is 5. And then the last step is, or second to last step, is to apply the quotient property. So 20 divided by 20 is 1 times 10. Quotient property of exponents, I subtract my exponents, so I do 2 minus 5. That's this 2 minus this 5. Now I combine my exponents, so I get 1 times 10 to the negative 3. To confirm that that is my final answer, does 1 fall, well, between 1 and 10? Or in this case, it is 1. So that is my final answer, 1 times 10 to the negative 3. Or you could write it as 1.0 times 10 to the negative 3.